I don't even like having to record this. There is good being done in the world and there's bad being done in the world, and I don't want to be pointing any fingers if I can help it at who's doing the bad. So I'm not going to mention the name of the organization that this just happened at in this video. I'm going to post this up on YouTube. If anybody does want to discuss that organization, knows which one it is, they're welcome to do that in the comments section. But I would rather that not be the focus of this. If anybody was there and they would like to give their take on what they saw happen, they're welcome to do that. If anybody wants to come in and condemn me in the comments, they're welcome to do that as well. I hear I was already slandered at the organization where this happened, which doesn't surprise me because they had some, well, issues to face. And apparently there were some people who weren't willing to face the issues in a reasonable way, which is why I'm making this video. Now, let me explain a little of just what took place from my point of view. Last time I was there, I was supposed to go to orientation, but there was a little miscommunication, and I missed orientation. I stayed through the main meeting. They have an orientation that's separate from the main meeting. They pull it off to the side. And so this time, I was being very careful to not miss the announcement for the orientation. My hearing's not very good, so I held off on getting the translation equipment because I wasn't sure how it was going to be announced, and I was mainly just kind of watching with my eyes for any sign, that it was being announced or that people were going in the direction where I figured the orientation was going to be held. Finally, someone came and asked me if I wanted to get my translation equipment. They had asked earlier, and I put it off at that time. When they came back and asked me again, I said, well, I'm trying to figure out when the orientation is going to be held and when it's going to be announced. And I said I don't know whether or not the translation equipment is going to be needed in the orientation. So they went and they asked, and they found out, they were told yes, the translation equipment would be needed in the orientation. So I went ahead and I got my translation equipment. Well, it's not really translation equipment. It's a poor wording for it. It's audio. It's an audio reception device. It's got headphones on it and listens in through, I'm assuming, radio frequencies. And of course, there are people who do the actual translating. Now, in the main meeting, they've got translators into English, Spanish, and Korean. Because those are the three languages that are spoken in these meetings. In the orientation, apparently not all of the languages were being supported in there because the speakers were only going to be speaking in English and Spanish, is my understanding what it was. But the Korean, at any rate, wasn't being supported. So it wasn't like it was in the main meeting. But the thing is, I'm fluent in Spanish and English, so I didn't really need the translation regardless. Now, since I had the translation equipment, when it came time to set everything up, and my hearing is bad, I figured, at the very least, it'll be helpful, like a hearing aid. And so I went ahead and turned it on and tuned it to the channel that they said. And I could actually hear quite well in the room through these headphones. The microphone was picking up and putting from where the translator was and putting it into my ears better than my ears were doing on their own. It was coming through very, very clearly. I think maybe the volume was, she said she had no volume control when I asked her about it, so I don't know, but it seemed like the volume was up really high, like the mic volume. Now, maybe, no, it couldn't have been my audio volume because I turned my audio volume down. That didn't help. She wasn't actually translating yet. They were setting things up and the people were talking to each other. And whenever she spoke, it came through very, very muffled. And I tried adjusting the volume, and turning it down didn't help. It still came through very, very muffled. It was impossible to make out a word that was being said by the translator through the translation device. And yet the background noises were coming through great. So I didn't know what the problem was, but there was a problem. And so I pointed it out. So someone did come over and they took my headphones and they're like holding them, but not listening, and the translator saying stuff, and I said, well, listen to it. And eventually, I mean, there was a discussion that was going on. Basically, what they were doing is they were denying there's a problem without looking into whether or not there's a problem. And finally, she did put the earphone next to her ear when nothing was being said. Meanwhile, I'm being told, well, no one else is complaining. Well, they're not translating anything yet. No one else is complaining, but I also didn't hear anybody saying, well, I hear it and it's coming through clear for me. Nobody was acknowledging that it was working or that it was not working other than me. I was the only one saying anything about it, other than, of course, the people who were saying, well, because you're the only one saying anything about it, therefore there's no problem. I don't understand that logic. And so finally, I just said, you know what? If this is your idea of how to handle someone saying there's a problem, this is not the kind of activist group I want to be in. They're there as activists, or so I was told, trying to make things better. Now, there are good people there, don't get me wrong. And I believe this organization is probably doing some good, or at least trying to. I don't know if they may have other agendas, and when it comes to silencing someone who's trying to say there's a problem, then that worries me, because then it amounts to nothing more than a special interest group. Hold on. Sorry about that. And so I'm making this video in the hopes that someone will correct the situation, that someone will point this out to them and say, hey, look, there's this video on YouTube about what happened there. People are finding out about what went wrong from another point of view. Maybe we should actually fix it. Now, like I said, there are good people involved in this. If I see them out on the streets and they're protesting something, I will be happy to join in the protest if it's something that, if it doesn't look to me like they're doing any harm, if it doesn't look to me like what they're doing is going to cause damage, I'll be happy to stand with them on whatever it is they think will make things better, even if I don't see it. For the simple matter of fact that we need to learn to stand together and say, hey, you know what? Somebody sees a problem. Let's listen to them. Let's hear them out. Now, I'm not going to say I didn't get any of that where I was at. One person did walk out with me. And I'm thankful for that. But I'm sad that there was not more of it. Now, I did ask this person to, go ahead and, go back in and enjoy the meeting and, not let what happened to me stop them from learning what they can learn. They apparently chose not to. That's a personal choice. I would love to hear back from this group that the problem has been addressed. And I don't mean the problem with the audio equipment. I mean the problem with denying that there's a problem without looking into it. That's gotta go. And I'd be happy to attend another meeting sometime if they want to straighten that out. I will be happy to stand with them on the streets if they're doing something good, like I would for anybody else. March with them, support them in every way that I can. But I'm not gonna stand and support something that can potentially do more harm than good. I mean, if I see a real potential for doing more harm than good, I'm not going to stand and support that. And when I see someone saying, you know what, this doesn't affect me, it doesn't affect you, leave it alone. I mean, this is what I was being told. I was being told, because I understand English and Spanish, it doesn't matter. Well, yeah, it matters. Because other people there don't necessarily understand both languages. And that's why they had the audio equipment in the first place. That's why they had the translator in the first place. The idea was to make it so that nobody missed anything. And yeah, we could have waited until, they start translating and see if anybody goes, hey, I'm not understanding this. And would they? I mean, not everybody will speak up when something's wrong. And I understand that. This is why I've been an activist since like 1976. Because I understand that things can be badly wrong, and a whole lot of us can see it and hear it and understand it and just not get out there and do anything about it. Not speak up. Especially when, you're in a group that might just say, hey, you know what? You're causing waves. We're throwing you out. Well, for the record, they threw me out after I demanded that I don't want to be there. After I said, you know what? I don't want to be in this. I'm leaving. I'm out of here. Then they threw me out. Well, not literally threw me out. I mean, I was going. But I mean, then they tell me, you're kicked out of here. What? Kicked out? Of a place I'm leaving? You can't fire somebody who quit. It's volunteer work, in the first place. But regardless, you can't fire somebody who isn't working for you. You can't kick somebody out who's on their way out. That's just stupidity. And then I hear that I've been slandered. I won't say exactly what it was that I was told was said about me. But I will say this much. Slandering someone for saying there is a problem, that's just pure evil. Now, is hearsay to me. I was just told something was said. If anybody watches this who actually said something they shouldn't have said, let that person correct it. Or at least do better in the future. Look into problems. Don't just deny them. If what you find is there's no problem, fine. But see, here's the thing. They heard me. They heard me saying there's a problem. I had the equipment there. It would have been real easy to just listen. Just listen to it. And see, it's coming through like... That's not speech coming through. If it would have been listened to, well, then they could have said, no, he's crazy. It sounds clear. They could have said, you know what, you're wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. But that wasn't done. They could have said, you're right, but we don't know how to fix it. They could have said, you're right, but we don't care. None of that was done. What was done was to say, well, you speak both English and Spanish. It doesn't matter. I said, but I'm not speaking up for me. I'm speaking up because someone else may need it. And they said, well, no one else is complaining. Well, nothing was being translated yet. They were setting things up. And so why would anybody complain if they don't realize there's anything to complain about yet? If they, it looks like everything is just still being set up and there isn't anything to hear yet. If somebody doesn't understand what's being said, I mean, the person who was speaking, who had the microphone there, was speaking in English. So if this was meant to be translation, I was under the impression it was translation into Spanish. I don't know. But if this was meant to be translation into English, then the conversation was happening in English. I mean, anybody who heard the translation, heard that, translation into English wasn't working, could have spoken up and said, hey, mine's working fine. Nobody did. And if it was meant for translation into Spanish, well, they kind of missed out on the whole conversation because it was in English. Now, I could have switched into Spanish and said something. I didn't think to do that at the time. I could have said, hey, ¿alguien tiene problemas con ese equipo? Or whatever. I could have tried something. And, I didn't even know what to do because, I was at what was supposed to be an activist group. A meeting of an activist group, a group of people who are supposed to be activists, acting, doing action, making things better. I'm an actor, I'm an activist, I act, I do things. This is what I do. It's what I do for a living, it's what I do in my off time. So I know what it looks like. And I didn't expect inaction in an activist group. I did not expect a choice of inaction. I didn't expect a choice of, what, we won't look into this, we'll choose to ignore it, and we'll claim that the problem doesn't exist. That's a bad combination. If you're going to choose to ignore something, then call it what it is. Say, you know what, we are choosing to ignore it. If you're proud of that action, I don't know what to tell you. I wouldn't be. But, if you're proud of the action, claim it. If that's not what you're proud of, then don't do it. Do what you can be proud of. This is just wrong that this whole thing even happened. I hope that this will start some discussion on how activist groups and organizations can improve. And I want to say the same thing for churches, by the way, because I know there are a lot of people out there who go to churches because they see a church as an organization meant for good. And a lot of churches do good. I've also seen a lot of damage done in the name of religion, and a lot of religions connected to churches. And so churches don't do all good. And I think it's very important that people recognize that any organization that can do good can also do bad. Any organization that can do bad can also do good. People who are in these organizations, people who are involved, have a responsibility to make things better. There's always room for improvement. And to deny a problem without looking into it is to deny the opportunity to make things better. To simply say, oh, things aren't perfect. Well, hey, I know a lot of religions claim some kind of perfection, that they're getting their instructions from something perfect. Okay, well, if they're right, then why don't all of the religions who claim to be getting their instructions from something perfect agree with each other? The reason, obviously, is that there is some imperfection involved. Whether it's in what they're getting their instructions from, or in how they're interpreting those instructions, or a combination of the two, I couldn't tell you. But I can tell you something is not quite right. There's a problem. So, whether it's activist groups or religions or a large corporation or anything else, if you see that something has gone wrong and you speak up and it gets denied without being looked into, do what I'm doing now. Make a video about it. Release it. It's not a big thing. Maybe only 1 or 2 people will ever see this video. Maybe no one will. But you know what? I'm not going to just sit on it. I'm putting it out there for the possibility that someone may see it and make a difference. Would you pass it on? Would you please increase the chance that someone who can make a difference will see this video? That someone may see it who might be in a position someday to choose between saying, hey, let's check out what he's saying, and saying, nobody else is complaining, there must not be a problem. Hey, do we really need to get huge crowds of people in an uproar before we acknowledge there's a problem? Do we really need to have bloody revolutions before governments make things better? Yes, the United States of America, where I live, has many groups that are out there crying for a bloody revolution because they think it's the only way things will get better. And I do not support the idea of a bloody revolution. But I applaud the people for standing up and saying that that's how they feel things need to be done to get improvements. I applaud them for saying what they feel is right. I applaud them for having the courage to stand up together and say something's badly wrong. Fix it. Even if they have to say fix it or else. I don't like that method. I'm not the kind who likes threats. I'm not the kind who likes violence. I badly dislike it. But people have to be heard somehow. Why do you think this Arab Spring thing happened? Why do you think Occupy happened? Why do you think all of this stuff around the world is happening? Because people aren't being listened to enough. And problems aren't being looked into enough. It's not a lack of solutions that's the big issue. It's a lack of looking into the problems. Because if we look into the problems enough, more solutions will be found and more solutions will be implemented. There are a lot of solutions already out there floating around, waiting to get implemented, but not being heard by enough people, because not enough people are standing up with those who are trying to promote them. I've got some really nice key solutions. Anybody wants to hear them? Hey, I've got videos out on some of the stuff already, and anybody can just ask me. Do a video response to this and tell me what you think, or put something in the comments saying you'd like to hear something on whatever. Name off a problem you'd like to see solved. I may not have the answer. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. Maybe somebody else does. And they might respond. Or they might say, hey, let's get together and form a group and try to solve it. I'm all for that. We need to learn as a humanity to work together, to think together, to become the societal brain that we have the potential to wake up and realize we already are if we weren't just sleepwalking through the experience. I see it. Do you? Please do. Turn this dream into a lucid dream. Recognize that everything that humanity has built around us, it didn't just happen. We built it. Humanity built it. You are humanity. That's you. You built it. Yeah, you. Not you, the body you're living in. But you, the society. you're living in. Yeah, that's you. It took me a long time to understand this. I've lived a life of altruism. I've lived a life of doing for others, not even understanding why I was doing it. And I finally figured out I was selfish. That's me. That's the extended me. I was looking out for me. Not this me, that me. If you have a brain cell who's so selfish as to think, what can I do for the body I'm a part of? Isn't that a whole lot better than a brain cell who's so selfish as to say, how can I take from other brain cells around me and hoard for myself? That's the wrong kind of selfish. Let's think bigger, shall we? How about thinking of the humanity self? Better yet, how about the universal self? How about recognizing that we are a spiritual being as well as we are physical beings? We live in a universe that contains not just energy, but information. That information is our culture and our language and everything else about us that makes us us. That is the spiritual being that we are. That is the deity, the embryonic deity that is humanity, the Son of God, if you want to call it that. I'm not speaking in religious terms because I think that the mythologies of Zeus and Aphrodite and Elohim and Thor are all accurate historical tales. I'm speaking in religious terms because there are a whole lot of people out there who still view the world in religious terms and have a lot of them have very good intentions and need to understand, for the good of all of us, that their good intentions have been misdirected by people who are telling them, you know what, spread my message and you'll be rewarded in the afterlife. Spread my message that brings money to me and you'll be rewarded in the afterlife. You know what? Hey, I disagree with that. I don't think it's real. But I'll tell you what, I'm willing to test it. I'll make an offer to anybody out there. I doubt anybody's even going to get to see this, but I'll make an offer to anybody out there. Anybody who's got lots and lots and lots of money and would rather have a good place in the afterlife. Now, I'm going to tell you, I feel the afterlife is after we live, right here. No other realm, no off to some, completely different place. Just a different way of looking at where we're already at and when we're going to be. But if you disagree with me and you think there is a heaven and hell that we can't see from here, that doesn't exist in this realm, that there's a being with arms and legs and a biological single brain that or whatever that's going to be judging us, you know what? You can have part of what's mine in the afterlife, whatever is, whatever I would be getting. Write it off. Let the deities out there, write a contract and I'll spiritually sign it or whatever. I mean, just trade me your your wealth here on this planet, whatever amount of it you think you can part with, in return for a better afterlife, and you go ahead and send your money to me. I'll take it, but I will not take it and say you're getting a better afterlife for it. I'll take it and say, hey, if you're right, you can have my share, or whatever part of my share that amount of money is worth. And that won't be up to me to decide. That'll be up to, whoever's doing the judging, that they can say, look, you did a good thing. You donated this to this person who's trying to do good. And yes, I am trying to do good. So if you want to do it for that reason too, hey, I'll take a donation. This is not something I've never been one to I've never been one to put the value of money on a high pedestal. But I will say this much. It can be useful as a tool in the society we live in. I think that's sad, but it's reality. So hey, if you see I'm trying to do good, and you want to send me your money and say, hey, let him do the good and let me enjoy the afterlife, and pray to God, tell him what you're doing, consider the contract signed. I'm willing to take that risk and do that test and put all my work into making a better world here for the future that I won't get to live in this body, because this body will eventually die. And I recognize that. I'm willing to trade whatever life you think exists after this, outside of this, for a chance to do better at what I see is here and what I can verify comes after this. Because yeah, it's testable. There is a spirit world out there that's testable. It's not the spirit world that religions are teaching us of. And there is good being done. And there are good organizations and good people. There are also mistakes being made. Denying there's a problem is not how to fix the mistakes. We can do better than that. So, to the organization that I was in earlier today, was this June 15th, Sunday, where I was supposed to be going to orientation. Hey, I wish you guys well. I hope you can do some good. And I hope that really is the intention of the people behind your organization. But I can see that the organization is not horizontal enough, in my opinion. It's too top down. There's too much control at the top. There's too much of the leadership playing God, so to speak. Value yourselves as individuals enough to speak up and say if you feel the same way. If you disagree with me, well, then you can say you disagree, or you can stay quiet if you want, or whatever. But hey, if you see someone being told to shut up because they speak up and say, hey, people should be listened to more here, the management shouldn't have the only voice. If you see somebody being silenced, trying to do what's right, speak up, please. And if you're told to shut up too, walk out. And on the way out, say something about what happened, like I did. Yeah, people will probably hear a different story about it afterward. But you know what? It still has been said. Sometimes that's the best you can do. And we've got to do our best. That's what being human's all about. Otherwise, hey, we might as well be a fungus or something, because, I mean, sure, a fungus does a little damage, but they do damage to what? To a tree or something that isn't really doing all that terribly much to fight them off. It's just life competing with other life. That's nature. We're natural too. We humans are natural. But we have the intelligence to think about what we would like nature to become like, what we would like our world to grow into. And if we look around us and we start to understand evolution, how it works, not just, the creationists' idea of evolution, which is completely bogus, not just evolution in the narrow sense of which life form came from which life form theoretically and what data backs it up in what ways and to what extent, but evolution in the true sense of small changes can add up to big changes. That simple. That's the whole concept behind evolution. It's all microevolution. People who say there's no such thing as macroevolution, well, they've got it half right. It's all microevolution. And if it doesn't add up enough, well, then there's no macroevolution. So if you see something that could be made a whole lot better from a lot of little changes, try to make one of those little changes. Because it could just be that without your little change, the big change won't quite happen. Maybe your difference is crucial. It's worth trying. Thanks for listening. Hope you like it. Hope you like what I had to say. I hope you'll pass it on.